I want to acknowledge Lavel, Devin, and Deshaun and their legacies at the University of Virginia. I also want to acknowledge their parents, Delana and Quentin Chandler Sr., Simone and Lavel Sr., Happy and Sean Perry, their siblings, grandparents, aunts, and so many other relatives and friends who have lost so much. We promised the family members that we would not forget their loved ones, and we will keep that promise.
Expectation, considering is a packed house. I would like to see a packed house, a sellout, and everybody showing up in orange, and supporting. Obviously, we're there for the game in support of our players on the field, but also when you think about the reality of it, three young men, man, they're no longer here, and it's difficult for me, and like some days are harder than others.
I especially want to send a message to our players. We love you. We love your fight, your determination, and your resilience. We love you because despite the adversity, you refuse to quit. The life lessons you're learning in these moments will carry you further than you could have ever imagined.
And we have an opportunity, right, as a community, as a football program, fan base, right, to pay respect to the three young men, their families, and then also the other 125 guys, that have chosen to stay the course, do what's difficult, and show up every single day. So my expectation is that everybody shows up and supports these guys and help these guys, put have some peace. We're going to need the fans. I mean, we need the support, and so I would like to see everybody show up in orange and cheer these guys on and be a part of the services that are going to take place before kickoff.
It's definitely going to be an emotional game at Scott Stadium. Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Frinchuli for Wahoo's 24/7. As you heard from both athletic director Carlo Williams and Virginia head coach Tony Elliott, this is a game that has been dubbed the UVA Strong Game. It is not only their season opener against James Madison, but it is also a game that will pay tribute to three of the fallen Cavaliers, the three players that were killed last November: Lavel Davis Jr., Devin Chandler, and Deshaun Perry. So definitely a lot of emotions for the first game at Scott. Since that tragedy, there will be a pre-game ceremony to honor those three young men. So before we get to the football part of it, let's talk a little bit about what to expect for this UVA Strong Game. If you can't be at the game, this game will be televised on ESPNU. At this time, I don't have the details of how and when this pre-game ceremony will be televised for those of you who can't be at the game. However, if you are at the game, Virginia is asking these fans to be at their seats by 11:30, which means try to get into the stadium as early as possible. As soon as the gates open, I would try. Obviously, it's the first home game of the year. There might be a couple of snags to get there in the line. So Virginia says, again, ceremony will start at 11:30 in the morning for the fallen Cavaliers. It will be an orange out game, so they're hoping fans show up in their orange gear, and the first 35,000 fans that enter the game, they'll be receiving a UVA Strong t-shirt. At this point, Virginia is hoping to get obviously a lot of fans in there. At last check, it was over 50,000 fans expected for this game. Obviously, it's against in-state rivals, so plenty of people expected for this game. James Madison's had this circled in their calendars long before, once this game was announced, I believe around 2 years ago. So that's obviously a big deal. Now, for those of you who will be at the stadium rather early for tailgating, if you want to be part of the Wahoo Walk, that is at 9:45 a.m. Family members of Davis, Chandler, and Perry all will join the team during the Wahoo Walk. Again, that's at 9:45 a.m. and fans are encouraged to arrive there early to line up on Whitehead Road. So again, Wahoo Walks at 9:45 a.m. The families will walk with the team going to the stadium, and then the pregame ceremony will be 11:30 a.m. So fans are encouraged to get there as well. So, and then if I know this is late on Thursday when this podcast can be published, but at 3 p.m. Virginia will have a memorial tree planting and plaque dedication honoring Chandler, Davis, and Perry on Arts Grounds on Culbreth Road between Ruffin Hall and the Drama Education Building on Friday. And then the Virginia Cheer Squad and Cavalier Marching Band will parade down the downtown mall and lead a Paint the Town Orange pep rally at the Ting Pavilion. The pep rally is set to start at 8:30 p.m. And the coaches and the Virginia football team will be in attendance in the rally as well. So a lot of stuff leading up to the actual game. So I wanted to bring those to the forefront, kind of talk about those things before we dive into the football aspect of it. Obviously, again, very emotional game for these Cavaliers and for the fan base. This is the first time you'll be at Scott for these young men since the spring game, but the first actual game at Scott since that loss to Pitt the Saturday right before the shooting. So we're going to take a quick break here. And then on the way back, we're going to talk about the football game. We're going to talk about JMU and what's the expectations around this game. Welcome back to the Good Old Podcast. I'm Jackie Frenchel for Wahoo's 24/7. So for the first half of the show, we kind of talk about the events leading up to the game. Obviously, again, it's going to be an emotionally charged game, and there will be a game planned on Saturday as well. It's a big in-state matchup that JMU, like I said, has circled this on their calendar. They've been wanting to prove that they're the team in the state, and they're the best team in the state. Well, Virginia has something to say about that. Virginia is coming off a loss to Tennessee, a loss that honestly most people expected. Meanwhile, JMU is coming into this game after defeating Bucknell, a team that JMU should have beat. So again, both teams coming into this matchup with results that many had expected. So let's start with some injury notes for Virginia. Obviously, the big question, honestly, is Virginia quarterback Tony Muskett. Muskett left the end of the fourth quarter, towards the middle of the fourth quarter, with an apparent shoulder injury. It was not on his throwing arm. He left the game against Tennessee holding on to his shoulder, obviously in a lot of pain. Now, Tony Elliott said during his press conference on Tuesday that Muskett was going to be day-to-day. That's something that we continue to follow. It's the reason why we are taping a lot later than normal when it comes to the podcast. Usually I want to get this out on Thursday morning, but I've been waiting to get the latest information. Full disclosure, on Sunday and Monday, I heard that he was not going to be able to play this Saturday. Then things started looking better as the week goes on. I was told possibly that he would not return until the NC State game. So that's something that there's been more positive feedback since I started hearing that. But again, it's still day-to-day, still a game time decision. Again, it's all about pain tolerance. When you think of his injury, since his non-throwing arm, it's how is he moving? How much does that pain distract? How much does that pain affect his game? How much slower does he go? How flexible he is? You don't want him to get hit again and injure him, or will injure another part of his body because he doesn't, he protects the part that's hurt naturally when you're human instinct. So again, that's what we're hearing. We'll obviously have more of an update for you as the game goes closer, but right now we're still monitoring Tony Muskett. The expectation is that Anthony Calandria, the freshman out of Clearwater, Florida, would be the starter for Virginia. So first-year freshman. He's been on grounds for a few months since January. Anthony Calandria, who's taken a few reps with the Wands this week, according to sources, and who's also taken a few reps in fall camp with the Wands. That's something that Virginia knew they needed to prepare because he was the backup quarterback. So obviously they knew that he needed to get reps with those first team members. So Anthony Calandria might make his debut for Virginia this Saturday. It is more than likely that he will, although Muskett might have a word to say about that as well ahead of the game. So that is something we'll be monitoring on Saturday. Chico Bennett Jr., who did not play in that opener after he had that freak injury, during the fall camp scrimmage. He is also a game time decision. So is safety Antonio Clary. Both of them were not on a depth chart on Tuesday, but Virginia head coach Tony Elliott said that they both are better and they're back in limited reps at practice. So it's about conditioning and seeing if it's medically appropriate for them to play. So they'll be asking their trainers to keep them updated on that regard. So again, we're monitoring those two. Again, if Chico Bennett it's not going, you expect Cam Butler to be at the bandit position and then Ben Smiley to take up that starting defensive end role. Sue Agunloe, unfortunately, is out for the rest of the year after tearing both of his patellar tendons during the game against Tennessee, which is, it's such an unfortunate thing for Sue because he had quite the game in Tennessee. And I think this was the year that he would left his mark. It was painting like that. So I think he would be. I know a lot of people are focusing on Tony Muskett as the crucial injury for this game, but I think the loss of Sue Agunloe, not only for the young man who's hurt and obviously had high hopes for this year, but I think he's going to be one of the biggest losses for the defensive line. He certainly was a guy that provided some nice quality experience, talented depth up front. A very talented young man. So he's going to be out for the rest of the season, had a successful surgery at the beginning of the week. So he has a long recovery ahead of him. As far as other injuries, we will be monitoring. Elliott says there are a couple guys that are probable for the game, which includes versatile athlete Lex Long, who played safety because Antonio Clary was out, moving from linebacker. He actually moved from safety to linebacker, then linebacker back to safety last game. He's probable. So is Josh Ahern, linebacker. He's also probable, and tight end Sackett Wood. That's why we see Josh Rawlings at tight end at depth chart. So we expect probably Josh Rawlings to get a few more reps. And then you expect Cam Robinson and Stevie Bracey to get more reps at linebacker with Josh Ahern sidelined. And then at safety, you can see maybe if Clary is close to getting ready, you might see Clary in there. It's who's the healthiest, Lex Long or Antonio Clary. I know Clary was technically available if there's an emergency situation against Tennessee. They didn't want to push him. So we'll see how that situation goes. Another key contributor that is back at practice is Jimmy Chris, the offensive lineman transfer from Penn State. He is back at practice. Again, it's all about conditioning. He's missed a lot of practice reps over the course of the last 2 weeks. And that's the same thing with Chico Bennett. Same thing with Antonio Clary. These guys have been sidelined for a few weeks. So you're dealing with conditioning as they prepare for JMU. So those are the big injuries that we'll be monitoring still the next 24 to 48 hours. A lot of them are game time decisions. So we will kind of expect to see who lines up against JMU. So JMU. So there's a lot of talk for this game. Again, I said it's the in-state game, so a lot of people around the state, around the University of James Madison have been talking a lot about their expectations around being the best team in the state. Obviously, talking about bragging rights. I mean, if you talk to NJMU fan, they'll bring up the basketball team beating Tony Bennett's men. So, of course, they would like to boast about beating Tony Elliott's men on the football field as well. So, when you look at JMU, you have a very disciplined team. You have a team that knows how to win. You have a team that is very well coached. As far as talent, there are good talents on this team. They've done a really good job of recruiting some very talented diamonds in the rough, some really talented in-state individuals to their team. So JMU isn't a walk in the park. It's not a cupcake that you normally would expect in a non-conference game. So JMU isn't a team you can just brush off. Now, the only thing I will say, they did lose a lot of good pieces from last year's team. And when we're talking about Virginia's quarterback issues because of injury, they have their own quarterback issues. They had a freshman who was expected to start this year. He started against Bucknell, and then Coach Signetti took him off and brought in Jordan McLeod, who's an experienced quarterback, but he did not win that starting job during fall camp. So Jordan McLeod is now the expected starter for this game. So obviously, that's a big question for JMU. How confident are they in their starting quarterback? One of the key battles that we will be keeping an eye on is cornerback Cohen King versus their wide receiver, Reggie Brown, who was their top receiver against Bucknell last week. He caught three passes for 77 yards, including a 57-yard touchdown pass from McLeod. He was also the second most productive wideout in receiving yards last season, and he just played in 8 of the 11 games. So he's a battle that obviously Virginia will be looking at. And then on the offensive line, JMU has 2 quality tackles in Nick Kidwell and Tyshawn Wyatt. So obviously they bring some experience up front to protect McLeod. This is obviously a game that, again, all football games are won in the trenches. So those are the 2 key ones to look into. The good news for Virginia was that Butler was one of the highest graded players according to Pro Football Focus last week against Tennessee. So that's a good matchup for him and a good matchup to watch during that game. I think the height advantage and physical is and the honestly height and weight advantage that you have in wide receiver Malachi Fields. So I think that's a matchup. Whoever goes up against them, is it Devin Coles or Chauncey Logan? I think that's going to be a battle to watch because I would expect Virginia to use Malachi Fields' frame against JMU. I think that's something where they could take advantage of his height. So definitely something to look forward to because, Devin Coles is going to have his handfuls with a 6'4", 220-pound Field. So that's definitely a matchup that you can expect Virginia to take advantage of if you're looking at matchups to take opportunities on the offensive side of the ball. So Virginia's offense obviously did not have the best game against Tennessee when you look at the numbers, but you also saw that this team was progressing in that game. So I know basically I've highlighted most of the key battles. I mean, you can talk about the offensive line. I mean, you want to take a look and see how Ty Furnish, Brian Stevens, Mikhail Boley, Noah Josie, Ugana Nana all do during this second game together. You're going to want to see how they protect whoever's under center because that is obviously the big question for here. So Virginia definitely has a few questions when it comes to there. So Tony Elliott kind of broke down a few things of what he expects for this game. So here's Tony Elliott talking about what he sees from this JMU team and what stands out about them.
They were educated yesterday. I think the record's like 100 and like in the last, I just did the last 10 years are like 100 and like 25 or something like that. 79. I know it was a 79% winning percentage. They've won 2 national championships. The record between UVA and JMU is 2-1, right? Last time we played was 1983. They're favored in the game, so they've been educated. And then when you cut on the tape, you see it too. Like you cut on the tape. So I don't know how closely they follow it. I mean, I don't know how closely they follow anything nowadays, to be honest with you, because they just have so much information, access to information at their fingertips. But they were educated about it, and they were reminded about. And then you look at Coach Signetti and what he's done and his success. Like they're very well coached. They're a very disciplined team. They got really, really good players. Those kids have a chip on their shoulder. Probably because they may not have been recruited by UVA. So they're being educated this week on who their competition is. Not trying to, and that's not trying to make it about JMU because that's never be the case. But I do feel like I have a responsibility as a coach just to, as I'm preparing them for battle, so to speak, to know what they're walking into or know who their opponent is. They're athletic, first and foremost. Athletic, very sound. You don't see them out of position much. They're very they're twitchy on the edges. They can get after the quarterback off the edges. I'm gonna say they're sneaky stout on the inside because you're gonna look at the stat sheet. I mean, you're gonna look at the paper and say, okay, well they're 6'2", 280, right? But when their D tackles 99 Carpenter, when he anchors down, right, he's hard to move. So structurally they're sound. They're athletic. Their linebackers are two big athletes that can run sideline to sideline, and then their corners can come up in press coverage, and they can isolate them. That's what you see. They have confidence in their corners to be able to play bump and run coverage with no help, which allows them to be able to dedicate more to the run, to be able to stop the runs. They like to run the football. Right, they can establish the run. Their backs are really good, and then that sets up their play action. It might be a little different this year, than they've been, in the past with their quarterback situation. But a lot of zone read, RPO type stuff, and then take their shots down the field. So they got playmakers. They got some experience. They got a very experienced offensive line. That's what you notice when you watch them. I think they're senior and then juniors across the board that have played some football, and they got good size, good length. They're physical. Their backs know how to find the creases, and then when they get into the open field, they're hard to tackle. So we're excited about the challenge. Anxious to see, because when you watched them in this past game, they were a little bit different depending upon the quarterback. When they had 14 in there, it was a little bit different offense than when they had number 2 in there. And so we're going to prepare for both. But the biggest thing is up front, they can establish a line of scrimmage. They can wear you down running the football, and then they can throw it when they need to.
Again, this game, honestly, it really is about who starts under center for me when you're trying to pick and make your predictions for this game. Tony Muskett, like I've said in my recap show on Monday, I thought he was a good game manager. When you're coming from Virginia, your margin of error is so small. You would need a Alex Smith-like game manager in Tony Muskett. So I think that is the main question. Is he not healthy? And Anthony Colandrea, you get that Florida swag. He definitely is a confident individual. You can see how he approaches the game. I mean, you saw him during the spring game. You also saw him against Tennessee when he was asked to come in. He doesn't let the environment get too much for him. He's not afraid of those big moments, which is something that you want to see from a freshman. But it is his, if he starts, it's going to be his first college start. It's going to be in an emotional game. It's going to be a big environment, and it's still going to be a new offensive line getting only their second game reps. Now we could possibly see if Jimmy Chris comes in and rotates in, but again, all about game conditioning. You're expecting Ty Furnish to protect him, but also get his snaps in order. That's something that Des Kitchen said, that he's already seen improvement with Ty Furnish. And honestly, to be fair to these offensive linemen, they're not facing a Tennessee defensive line on Saturday. Again, I've said it, I don't know how many times over the course of the last week during podcasts, radio shows, or just when I write about the last game. Tennessee's defensive line is the best defensive line this team will face all year. Again, maybe UNC and Miami will give you something of a tougher front. But right now, and especially the first half of the season, there's no other D-line that will have the physicality and speed that the Tennessee D-line gave you. That was quite a test for a brand new offensive line to be dealt with. So they have to protect Anthony Colandrea. So when you see Colandrea, you see more of a dual threat quarterback. Tony Muskett is more of a pocket passer. Anthony Colandrea will try to scramble, try to extend a few plays with his legs. People call him electric. People call him, a gamer is what 24 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivan said. He was able to watch Colandrea a few times, including at a 10-game jamboree last spring, so before Virginia offered him. And he said he was quite impressed at what he's able to do against some South Florida defenses. If you follow high school football in the state of Florida, you know how many talented players are in those South Florida teams in that secondary. And he was able to carve up and grab, I think it was 8 touchdowns, 7 passes, and 1 rushing, or was it 7 touchdowns, 1 passing? But it was quite an impressive performance and put Colandrea in Virginia's radar among other schools, including USF when they received their new head coach, the former Tennessee OC, who was there, liked what he saw about Colandrea as well. So again, he's a gamer. He's going to extend plays, but you're also going to have some potential mistakes in those areas. I think with Tony Muskett, you have more of a game manager, a guy who's learned the ropes a little bit. He has game experience. Anthony Colandrea is going to learn on the job. So I guess that means it's time for predictions for me. Actually, before I do predictions, Virginia is also hosting recruits for this home game. So I have Cats Confidential coming at you at Friday morning. It'll be update with a complete visitor list. Virginia is hosting a number of recruits, including one of the biggest visitors, I think, in my mind, is wide receiver Christian Zachary, who committed to the Cavaliers in the summer. I have the whole visitor list posted on the site, but I wanted to highlight Christian Zachary because NC State is trying to flip him. He is expected to visit NC State for their game against Louisville later this month. He was meant to visit this weekend, actually, at NC State for their Notre Dame game, but switched his official visit to later this month. So Virginia has him on grounds this week, which is a good bet for him to coming in during a big environment like this. Virginia would love to seal it, and maybe him not visiting NC State after this weekend. So that is something to monitor. Christian Zachary's having one heck of a start of the season for his high school senior year. A lot of eyes on his talent. Virginia did a good job of scouting him and offering him so early. Adam Mims, Des Kitchings, all those guys have such good connections in South Carolina, and they were able to identify Christian Zachary pretty early in his recruitment. So that is something that we'll be watching. But again, he will be on ground. So recruiting information also on Wahoo's 24/7. We always have you updated with all the visitors that will be on grounds during game day. And obviously we'll have game day coverage as well from Scott Stadium. So plenty to discuss when it comes to that. But now I've delayed it as much as I could. So a prediction. So prior to this season, I had Virginia beating JMU. And I think if Tony Muskett was the starter, and if Tony Muskett is the starter, although I think if you're not 100%, I'm not as confident, I would still pick Virginia over James Madison. With Anthony Colandrea under center, it's hard for me to choose Virginia over JMU. I think Anthony Colandrea is a very, very talented quarterback. I think he's got a high ceiling. I think he's going to have a good career at UVA. It's going to be hard for his first game. And all that to say, I'm still picking Virginia over JMU. I think it's going to be a tighter contest than anyone would like. I know the Vegas has right now still picked JMU. I think the spread has gone down to 5. It started at 6.5, but I think JMU is still favored by 5 points. I'm choosing Virginia because of the intangibles that you have in this game. You have questions on their center, yes. You have questions at the O-line, yes. But you don't question this fight of the team when it comes to the environment that is going to be played on Saturday. They're playing for Lavel Davis Jr. They're playing for Devin Chandler, and they're playing for Deshaun Perry. There's nothing I could put in a stat sheet for you to say why this matters. It just does. So I think this game will be an emotional game for everybody, and I give Virginia the edge because of what this game means for them at the end of the day. So I'm picking Virginia over JMU for this game. And again, I'll have full coverage from game day on Wahoo's 24/7. I'll be back here on Monday for your game recap. And then next Thursday, once again, I'll have your preview that game because it's Friday next week, since it's the Maryland week and it's a Friday night game. I'll hopefully have it Wednesday night-ish, Thursday morning, so that overnight hour, so that there's more time for you guys to listen to the game. Maybe you're stuck in DC traffic if you're going to Maryland. I'll be one of those going for the DC traffic. I'll be also traveling to Maryland for the first time. This is my first time going to Maryland, College Park, since the last time Virginia was in College Park, when Jake McGee was still part of the Virginia squad. So that's it's my first time back to College Park. So yeah, that'll be an interesting contest. But again, follow us on Wahoo's 24/7 as we continue to count down and the latest on Tony Muskett's injury and what are the expectations for this team. So again, hope you guys, if you're going to Charlottesville, hope you guys have a safe trip to Virginia UVA Scott Stadium on Saturday. And then if you're not, we'll make sure to have all the information you need to watch the pregame ceremony and also the game on Wahoo's 24/7. For us, I hope you guys have a good rest of your night and a great Friday.